Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful spring morning. Hopefully you were able to get on a little bit early and catch all of the announcements. And there is one announcement in particular that I wanted to go over that is important for all of the members of the fellowship. 3 weeks from today on Sunday, May 16th, after the service is our annual meeting. So it's important that everybody show up. We need to have a quorum so that we can vote for those important things like the budget and the slate of candidates. So please put that into your calendar. So welcome. Welcome to this congregation. We're for over 50 years now. We've been seeking to foster community, to grow our spirits, to serve others, and to work for justice. We're very glad that you've chosen to be with us this morning in our sacred cyberspace. And we hope that you will experience some love and some inspiration this morning. After our service, we hope you'll stick around for our very informal coffee hour for some fellowship and some conversation. Our monthly Touchstones themes strive to help us shape our days and guide our journey. And our April topic is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the quality and practice that overcomes our fragmentation so that we can experience wholeness. Mindfulness is the call to pay attention. M. Scott Peck said that the principal form of love is attention. Being mindful is paying attention to ourself, others, and the world. Mindfulness requires skill, but its practice is transformative of ourself and our relationships. Our sermon today is from the Reverend Dr. Neal Jones. And this is the very first time that he has been a guest speaker for us, so we're very excited about that. Reverend Dr. Jones is a psychologist at the Pisgah Institute of Asheville, and he was born and raised in North Carolina, and he earned his BA from Wake Forest University, his Master of Divinity from Southeastern Seminary, and his Doctorate of Psychology from Baylor University. He has served as the minister of 5 different congregations in North and South Carolina, Texas, and Pennsylvania, and most recently at Mainline Unitarian Church near Philly. He also serves as the chair of the National Board of Trustees of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Reverend Dr. Jones teaches and practices a spirituality of personal wholeness, relational respect, and social justice. The title of his sermon today is My Definition of Spirituality. More and more Americans are describing themselves as spiritual, but not religious. And I know I certainly fall into that category. What does it mean to be spiritual? And this recovering Southern Baptist turned humanist, UU minister, will share his understanding of spirituality. Now, let us enter into worship together. For our prelude this morning, our amazing musician has chosen a song by Sting.
Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you. It will guide you well. When you're down and they're counting, when your secrets are all found out, when you're troubled to mounting. When the map you have leads you to doubt, when there's no information and the compass turns to nowhere that you know well, let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. When the doctors fail to heal you, when no medicine chest can make you feel well, when no counsel leads to comfort, when there are no more lies they can tell, no more useless information, and the compass spins between heaven and hell. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. Let your pain be my sorrow. Let your tears be my tears too. Let your courage be my motto, that the north you find will always be true. When there's no information and the compass turns to nowhere you know well, let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. Let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well.
Wow, what a great song. Thank you, Avi. We definitely all need guidance from something other than our egos. Please feel free to join me as I read our Lighting the Chalice words. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. Our opening words this morning are from James Austin. Mindfulness is a kind of remembering to be here, to be present, to pay attention to this moment of life. When we bring awareness to this moment, we know what we are doing and we know we are alive. Our amazing Director of Religious Exploration, Angela Connon, has a message for all ages.
Good morning, everybody. I have a great story for us today, I have to say. I just love it. And I think you will too. It's called The Fish Who Found the Sea. And I picked it because I know today we are doing, we're exploring spirituality. And I think this book offers a lot of places to explore that theme. But I'm not going to tell you too much about it because I want you to take your own meaning from it. So here we go with The Fish Who Found the Sea. It's by Alan Watts and illustrated by Koa Lee. Once upon a time, there was a fish who lived in the great sea. And because he was just an ordinary fish who had never known anything outside the great sea, he was not really aware that he was in it. He swam up and down and around without ever noticing that he was moving through the water, for the water was transparent. Wherever he moved, it got out of the way of his nose, and yet gave him something against which he could push with his tail and so move himself along. Without it, he could neither swim nor live, but for all he knew, he might just as well have been moving in empty space. Then one day, something peculiar happened to him. He began to think how curious it was that he could swim, for here he was moving up and down and around in the midst of nothing at all, and all by his own power. This, he thought, was surely very clever of himself. And then something else happened. You know how it is when you start thinking about something you do automatically, such as breathing or riding a bike? You begin to get confused. It was the same with this fish. He began to get confused in his swimming. Looking down into waters below him, he was suddenly terrified at the thought that he might forget how to swim altogether and go plunging forever into the darkness. At that moment, all his skill at swimming left him, and he began to fall. He realized then that there was just one chance of saving himself, to grab a hold of his own tail with his mouth and hold himself up. At once he curled up and made a snap at his tail. Unfortunately, his spine was not quite supple enough, and he missed. Not yet discouraged, he tried again and again with the same result, so that for some time he whizzed around in circles in frantic pursuit of his own end. The faster he chased his tail, the faster it moved away. This had been going on for some time when he began to realize that he was not getting anywhere, that his life was becoming dull, meaningless, and horribly monotonous. But he was much too frightened to stop. The fish was sure that if he relaxed the chase for a moment, he would plunge headlong into the abyss, and so he redoubled his efforts to save himself, in spite of the fact that he became more and more tired and disgusted every minute. Soon he saw that he was in a hideous dilemma. He must either fall into the abyss or go on chasing his tail. Both alternatives were equally horrifying. He waved his fins in panic and prepared to die. In the meantime, the great sea had been watching this extraordinary behavior with mixed feelings of amusement and sorrow. For the great sea was as loving as it was vast. It gave all the creatures of the deep room to live and swim around. It never intruded upon them, always retiring generously before their noses and letting itself be pushed by their tails so that they could move along. Still more, the great sea always surrounded them in such a way that it bore them up and made itself transparent so that they could see where they were going and enjoy all the wonders of the deep. Yet here was a fish who thought he swam all by himself, who had gotten himself into a panic and was behaving as no fish should behave. Therefore, the great sea called out to the unhappy fish and asked him, "What do you think you're doing?" To which the fish replied, "I'm trying to catch hold of my tail and save myself from falling." "You have been doing that for a long time," observed the great sea. and you are no nearer to catching it than when you started. So why haven't you fallen yet? Don't bother me, retorted the fish. Can't you see I'm busy? That's just what I can see, the great sea went on patiently. But apparently you can't. You haven't caught your tail. You haven't fallen into the abyss, and yet you are still busy. How come? Oh, don't be silly, snapped the fish. Of course I haven't fallen down because goodness, because I'm swimming. You may well say goodness, said the great sea. For how does it happen that you have stayed afloat and been able to swim during all this absurd performance? This was too much for the fish. He stopped his chase and looked around to see who was talking to him. There was no one to be seen, and it was strange, but although he wasn't doing anything himself, he was still floating in the water, though it seemed to him as if he were suspended in empty space by some invisible force. There now, continued the great sea, you thought you were doing it all by yourself, and you never knew that I hold you up all the time. I have given all of myself to you, and yet you have forgotten me and wasted yourself in pursuing your own end. For it is in me that you live and swim and are able to be a fish, and to you I have given the height and the depth, the length and the breadth of myself in which to swim. From that moment, the fish was happier than any other fish in all the waters of the world. Setting his own end behind him, where it belonged, he set out to explore the ends of the sea. And he found that whether he moved up or down, to the left or to the right, everywhere the great sea expanded before him and supported him, so much so that he swooped and climbed and danced in joy. A creature in his true element, out of himself and into the sea, where indeed he had been all the time. And that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Angela. That was an amazing story. I'm sure that there's been times we've all felt like we're just going around and around in circles. Alan Watts was such an amazing human being. And if you've never heard him speak, I strongly urge you to go to YouTube and pick out one of his many videos and listen to it. Very powerful stuff. For our musical interlude this morning, Avi has chosen a song called Bigger Than Us.
Do you feel it? Somebody's up there pulling the strings. We're not on our own. Do you see it? It's just like watching gravity fall, and you don't know how. Oh, but signs point to a miracle. It's not coincidence we've given into this. Love is something bigger than us, bigger than us, yeah. Love is something bigger than us. Look above us, you'll see what I've been trying to say. These stars were arranged just like we were. I thought I found this all on my own. That's crazy now. Oh, and it's all so unbelievable. I'm not superstitious. Maybe it's just making sense that this love is something bigger than us, bigger than us. Yeah, love is something bigger than us, bigger than us, bigger than us, bigger than us.
Thank you, Avi. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, the Reverend Dr. Neal Jones, for his reading.
Can you see me? Okay. Thank you, Gil. And thank you, Lower Bucks, for having me as your guest minister. I miss Pennsylvania. I have to confess, I don't miss the winters, but I do miss the people. And it's my pleasure to be with you this morning. Our reading comes from writer Frederick Buechner, and it's entitled Life. He writes, after lecturing learnedly on miracles, a great theologian was asked to give a specific example of one. There is only one miracle, he answered. It is life. Have you wept at anything in this last year? Has your heart beat faster at the sight of beauty? Have you thought seriously about the fact that someday you will die? More often than not, do you really listen when people are speaking to you instead of just waiting your turn to speak? Is there anybody you know in whose place, if one of you had to suffer great pain, you would volunteer yourself? If your answer to all or most of these questions is no, chances are you are dead.
Wow, thank you. That was powerful. For our offertory this morning, our split plate recipient for the month of April is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans afflicted by mental illness. NAMI Mercer provides free, top-rated mental health programs and services for our community. A robust local affiliate of NAMI, NAMI Mercer listens, leads, educates, and advocates, empowering families and individuals affected by mental illness to build lives of quality and respect, free of stigma and discrimination. They help thousands of families and individuals each year. So please be generous. And as always, you can contribute through the website or through the e-newsletter. And now for our sermon, Reverend Jones will share his definition of spirituality.
Thank you. Yes, this morning I would like to share my definition of spirituality, but before doing so, I should say to any visitors or new members who may be with us this morning that when a UU minister speaks, we are not speaking on behalf of Unitarian Universalism or the denomination. or even for the congregation. Every member of the congregation can think and speak for themselves. As a minister, like every member here, I'm sharing with you my understanding and my perspective based on my experience and education. In a Unitarian congregation, we learn from each other. And this minister is much as a student as a teacher. So my understanding of spirituality, like my understanding of anything else, is not definitive because I'm speaking for myself. Though my perspective may very well represent one of a great variety of perspectives you're likely to find in your congregation, which in my mind is the brilliance of Unitarian Universalism. And neither is my understanding final, for I suspect that my understanding will change as I hopefully continue to learn and grow. As Gil mentioned, it has become popular these days for people to claim that they are spiritual but not religious. What does that mean? At one time, being spiritual and being religious were synonymous, but spiritual and religious are getting a divorce as more and more Americans identify themselves as religiously non-affiliated, the famous nuns, who now represent a quarter of all Americans and a third of those under 30. I define spirituality as our capacity to connect with that which is greater than ourselves. Now, the more traditionally religious among us might use the word God to describe that something greater, whereas we humanist types prefer such words as humanity, life, the world, or the universe. Spirituality is the largest perspective by which we understand ourselves, others, our world, and life as a whole. And this transcendent connection gives us a sense of purpose and meaning, as well as a context for developing our values and ethics. Now, some people's sense of the transcendent is large as all of humanity, all living beings, the planet, the universe, life itself, while some people's sense of transcendence doesn't extend very far beyond themselves, perhaps no further than their own family, their ethnic group, their religion, their country. In my understanding, spirituality is innate and universal. Everyone is born with a capacity for self-transcendence, a capacity that is refracted through one's religion, culture, gender, ethnicity, family dynamics, personality, and life experiences, which explains the great variety of spiritual expression and experience across humanity. Spirituality is a slippery term because it's extremely subjective and personal. In fact, our spirituality may be the most personal thing about us. When we refer to someone's spirit or soul, we are referring to the essence of who that person is, the core of his or her being. Spirit means breath. The Bible portrays God as breathing Adam into life by breathing into him. Like our breathing, our spirituality animates our lives by centering, organizing, and defining who we are. Now, religion is a group's organized expression of spirituality, with the trappings of history and tradition, beliefs and doctrines, rituals and ceremonies, sacred writings and ecclesiastical authorities. Spirituality is deeper and broader than any particular religious tradition. Just as a bucket of seawater can give us a taste of the ocean, but cannot contain the ocean, no religion can express all of spirituality. and any religion which claims to be the only way to truth is being presumptuous and arrogant, in my opinion. This is why I appreciate Unitarian Universalism's embrace of all religious, philosophical, and spiritual paths, as audacious as that attempt may be. Now, I realize that some of us humanist types are squeamish about the word spiritual, but we should not be afraid of that word, because it's not about divinity, but humanity. Your humanity and mine. It's about fulfilling our capacity to be human. Now, the traditional use of the word salvation implies that something needs to be imparted to our human nature to make us a whole human being. Now, I'm interested in the original meaning of words, and the word salvation shares the same root as the word salve, which, as you know, is an ointment which brings health and wholeness. Our salvation does not require any additives. Everything necessary for our growth and development into whole human beings is implanted within us. The seeds of our humanity are like seeds planted in the ground. The potential needs only the right conditions for growth to occur. So, what are some of these capacities with which we are born and which, if developed, would enable us to get beyond ourselves? Well, I'd like to suggest just a few. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but I do believe it to be an essential list of what it means to be spiritual, which is to say, what it means to be human. Number one, the capacity for reverence. Now, typically reverence is associated with belief in God, but it need not be. The capacity for reverence is the sense of mystery and awe one feels about the universe and life and one's own life. Many of us have felt that sense while standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon, or in the delivery room when our child is born, or staring up at a canopy of glittering stars on a dark night, or into the eyes of someone who loves you with all their heart. A sense of reverence is awareness that life is grand and wonderful, beyond our comprehension and imagination. It's knowing that though I am small and limited and finite, I am part of something much bigger than I. Now, we UUs can at times be dismissive of emotion, but the capacity for reverence is primarily the capacity to feel deeply. Number two, the capacity for gratitude. Now, gratitude is an awareness that this awe-inspiring universe and people, past and present, provide us with what we need to live and flourish. Life has given us gifts that we have neither earned nor deserved. Indeed, life itself is a gift. Our parents have conceived us. Friends and family have supported us. Teachers and books have taught us. Art and music have inspired us. Plants and animals have given their lives for our nourishment. The air around us fills our lungs. The sun warms our planet. Gratitude is the capacity to recognize that none of us would be here if not for the contributions of someone or something else. It's a recognition that we are ultimately dependent, a truth that runs counter to the American myth of the self-made person who pulls him or herself up by their own bootstraps, the rugged individualist who has gotten where he or she is by their own brains and brawn, the self-reliant person who doesn't need anybody. Traditional religion uses the word grace, which shares the same Latin root as gratitude, to refer to God's unmerited favor. Again, we need not believe in God to feel grateful for life's giftedness. Number 3, the capacity for stewardship. Now, in church, stewardship has become synonymous with the pledge drive, but it's a word with much richer connotations. An awareness that the universe as a whole, and this planet in particular, sustain us, leads to a feeling of obligation to protect the earth and preserve its resources and its beauty. It also leads to a feeling of obligation to be a responsible steward for one's own personal resources, one's property and possessions, time and talent, body and mind, an obligation to share these gifts for the betterment of others and society as a whole, not merely for our own self-enhancement. The capacity for stewardship is the ability to see ourselves as custodians, which runs counter to capitalism's pressure to cast us as mere consumers who regard the earth as providing a limitless supply of goodies to devour, exploit, buy, and accumulate. Such a truncated view of ourselves and our planet is leading to the earth's destruction and will lead inevitably to our own. For as Chief Seattle wisely put it, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. Number 4, the capacity for self-worth. Most of the universe is inanimate matter, but we've been gifted with the privilege of being alive. And whatever the duration or condition of that privilege, life is a privilege nonetheless, which makes our lives valuable and meaningful. An awareness of this privilege leads to a recognition of our own dignity and worth as human beings. The capacity for self-worth is the ability to realize that even though we may have shortcomings and make mistakes and have a lot of growing up to do, we are fundamentally good because life is good and we are alive. To use a biblical image, it's the capacity to hold two truths simultaneously. We are dust and we are the image of God. This awareness of our basic human goodness runs counter to the old doctrine of original sin, which holds that human beings are fundamentally defective and need a savior. Our Unitarian ancestors rightfully rejected this debilitating belief. Number 5, the capacity for love. The ability to recognize our own dignity and worth is inseparably tied to our ability to recognize the dignity and worth of others, for we share our humanity. It may sound trite, but it's true. We can love others only insofar as we can love ourselves, and we can love ourselves only insofar as we are able to love others. People who cannot abide others who are greedy, for example, expose their inability to accept their own tendencies toward greed. And likewise, someone who is driven by perfectionism can be expected to be just as judgmental of the imperfection of others as they are of their own imperfections. Love of others and self-love are really one and the same capacity. A well-developed capacity for love extends to both others and oneself what dignity and worth deserve. honesty, trustworthiness, kindness, patience, respect, generosity, forgiveness. Number 6, the capacity for justice. A well-developed capacity for love leads to a desire for justice. Or in the words of Dr. Cornel West, justice is what love looks like in public. If you truly love others, you realize that it's not enough to give them chocolates and roses. You must give them a social system which treats them with the dignity and equality that all human beings deserve. You must give them a political system which provides them with a seat at the table of self-government, regardless of their socioeconomic status. You must give them an economic system which doesn't take necessities from the masses in order to give luxuries to the classes. We are not individuals who live in isolation from each other. I know that's a popular philosophy these days, but it's a lie. For better or worse, whether we like each other or not, we live in community. Or in the words of Dr. King, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. A well-developed capacity for justice takes responsibility for the human environment, which forms or deforms the human beings within it. I'm always surprised and disappointed when Unitarians of all people ask me what social action has to do with spirituality, as if the two were mutually exclusive. The pursuit of social justice is not the absence of spirituality, it is its fulfillment. Number 7, the capacity for creating meaning. Squirrels, as far as we know, don't pause in the midst of gathering nuts and ask, what's the meaning and purpose of my life? The question of meaning and purpose is a distinctly human question, and it's a challenge for all of us. Now, some religious people may think that they're off the hook in answering this question because in their way of thinking, God has a master plan for the entire universe. Even if that were true, believers must still discern the will of God for their lives. Whether or not you believe the universe has meaning, you must still figure out the meaning and purpose of your life. Ironically, this capacity to define meaning is not developed by asking, what is the meaning of life? It's not a question to be asked, but to be lived. The meaning of life is discovered in and through the experience of living. Now, for many people, life is made meaningful by their close relationships, particularly their families and friends. Many would agree with Henry Nouwen. There is no reason to live if there is nobody to live for. Many live for their work. Now, the biblical book of Genesis describes work as a curse. But for those of us who take pride in our work, who gain a sense of mastery and competency through our jobs, and who feel that we're making a contribution to the lives of others, work feels more like a vocation than an occupation. Many define their life's meaning through their service to the larger community, through making this world a better place than they found it. And many find meaning in savoring the gifts of life, in relishing the small pleasures that are easy to overlook, the aroma of a fresh cup of coffee, the crispness and coolness of clean sheets on the bed, the delight in a child's laughter, the orange glow of a setting sun. The more we immerse ourselves in our lives, the less the question of meaning matters, because the living of our lives answers the questions for us. Number 8, the capacity for living with mortality. We humans are also the only animals who are haunted by an awareness of our mortality. Like the question of meaning, the issue of mortality is extremely personal. It's not simply that I know that all living creatures will die. It's knowing that I will die. A hard reality for most of us to face. I'm always amused by the certainty of some ministers that there is life after death. Some can describe the conditions of heaven and hell as vividly as the furniture in their living rooms. Wouldn't it be more honest to admit what we know and what we don't know? And wouldn't it demonstrate more integrity to make promises, only promises that we know we can keep? What we do know with certainty is that there is life before death, and this one life of which we know is made all the more meaningful because of our awareness that it will end. Or as the therapist Irvin Yalom succinctly put it, although the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. Without a deadline, no pun intended, we postpone what we need to do. A deadline gives us a sense of urgency, and death, the ultimate deadline, gives our lives a sense of preciousness. I'm reminded every time a friend or acquaintance dies that we dare not fritter away this present moment, because it may very well be the only moment we have. We should savor the sweetness of the simple pleasures precisely because they do not last. We should be more fully present with others because they will not always be around. We should be more fully present with ourselves, being more authentic and less pretentious. We should put first things first and last things last. We should worry less and live more. A well-developed capacity for living in the shadow of death enables us to live as if our lives were not mere dress rehearsals. As far as we know, this is the one and only performance. So in my way of thinking, these are just some of the capacities that represent our spirituality. Clearly, all persons are at different points in the process of developing these capacities. Some come to see life as a gift, whereas others experience life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, to quote Hobbes. Those whose basic needs have not been satisfied in life are more likely to feel gratitude than those who've been deprived. Those who have been shamed or abused may not come to recognize their own dignity and worth or that of others. To be born with a capacity does not guarantee that the conditions of life will favor its development. Genetics, family of origin, geography, socioeconomic status can deal us a promising or a problematic hand, to say nothing of the cards we deal ourselves through our own choices in life. Another trite but true statement is that life can be unfair and unkind. The ethical challenge for all of us is to make this life fairer and kinder, so that all persons can have the opportunity to realize their full capacities as human beings, to be spiritual, whether they are religious or not. Amen.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was beautiful. Definitely resonated with me, I'm sure with everyone here. Now is the time in our service when we lift up one another in love. Let us be fully present and listen with open hearts. If you wish to share a joy or a sorrow, please click on participants and then click raise hand, and we will help to unmute you. For everyone's benefit, please be brief.
Bill Stroop.
All right, Bill. You can unmute Bill Stroop.
I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to Ann Fisher, our treasurer. A few months ago, we got a letter from the IRS and they were questioning our charitable distributions. Ann wrote a letter and we sent it to them. And now, of course, we had a deadline with which to send all of this information. They had as long as they wanted to get back to us, and they finally got back to us, told us that we owe nothing, and everything was accepted. So thank you very much, Ann.
Yes, Ann is a joy.
Bill Appleton, hang on. Okay, Bill Appleton.
All right, Bill, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Robin and I have both got our second shot, so we're thrilled about that. I got terribly, well, we both got ill afterwards, but comparison to what that illness could be, just thankful that neither one of us ever caught COVID in the first place, and looking forward to, when we can all get together again. Thank you.
I agree. It is a blessing, and we'll be getting together with a picnic before too long, so that'll be great.
Anyone else?
Anyone else like to share this morning? Don't see anybody. Well, whether you shared or not today, for your joys, we in this community join you in celebration. And for any sorrows or concerns, may you feel our sympathy and our compassion. Let's pause for just a moment of gratitude, silent meditation, and prayer. For our closing song, Avi has chosen one of our favorite hymns, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Root, hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Avi. Please feel free to join me as I read our closing words. When we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less, it becomes more. And so we extinguish our chalice, but we take its light and warmth with us, multiplying their power by all of our lives and sharing it with the world. Our service is concluded now. Please feel welcome to stay with our very informal coffee hour. You can now unmute yourself and engage in chat.